Moscow turned into hell as Russia lost 260,000 tons of weapons in a single blazing night, and it happened without a single enemy missile in sight. For years, the Kremlin boasted that its Vladimir region megadepot was impregnable, a steel heart pumping ammunition to every front. Yet in less time than it takes to reload an artillery battery, that heart stopped beating. Eyewitnesses counted a dozen rolling fireballs, each the size of an apartment block, rocketing skyward, while ground teams stood powerless because the depot's own CO2 suppression system had been stripped for parts weeks earlier to patch smaller outposts. In one catastrophic sweep, Russia's western supply chain was set back the equivalent of 3 months of production, erasing stockpiles earmarked for the summer offensive. Western satellites recorded a heat signature hotter than the 2019 Siberian wildfires and almost twice the infrared bloom of the 2022 Belgorod blast, confirming that the bulk of the lost tonnage was high-explosive artillery shells, thermobaric warheads, and truck-mounted rockets the Army can no longer replace at speed. Analysts who ran the numbers estimate the direct economic hit north of $8 billion, but the strategic damage is even steeper because the depot burned through more 152mm rounds in 8 hours than Russia can forge in 8 weeks. Subscribe if you want the unfiltered version of events that mainstream outlets will only whisper about. Number 5, the arsenal that should have been impossible to ignite. It was supposed to be a fortress of concrete earth berms and triple-layer blast walls. Yet, investigators found that the depot's most vulnerable bays stored propellant bags next to anti-tank mines to save forklift time. That shortcut turned every pallet into a linked fuse, so when one overheated stack flashed, the chain reaction chewed through 70,000 tons before the first fire crew arrived. Satellite photos reveal storage cells built for 3,000 tons, holding almost double that volume, a reckless overstocking ordered in January to rush munitions toward Kupiansk. In choosing speed over safety, commanders created the ideal tinderbox, proving that Russia's logistics culture still treats quantity as protection, not risk. The surprise twist, however, is that the depot's insurance files show a fire suppression upgrade deferred 3 times since 2020, apparently to redirect funds to parade ground renovations in Moscow. That accounting sleight of hand will now haunt the general staff in every audit. Number 4, the silent saboteurs inside Moscow. Russian media blamed a discarded cigarette, but internal FSB briefs point to deliberate tampering with the depot's temperature alarms 2 days before the blaze. Maintenance logs list 3 civilian contractors who swiped into the bunker zone, all Ukrainian-born welders hired through a shell company run out of Minsk. One technician allegedly bypassed the automatic spray deluge by bridging 2 control relays with copper wire, leaving the building blind to heat spikes. If that sabotage timeline holds, it highlights how Moscow's mobilization has opened doors to thousands of poorly vetted workers desperate for cash. The long-term implication is chilling. Every rushed repair project becomes a Trojan horse, and the Kremlin's own effort to replenish the front might be importing the next disaster. But here's the real surprise. Investigators believe at least one rogue employee streamed live footage of the initial blast to Telegram, effectively turning the depot into a propaganda stage before the firestorm peaked. Number 3, a logistics collapse spreading across the front line. With the Vladimir depot gone, the Western Military District must now siphon ordnance from 2 smaller bases 400 kilometers east, adding a day and a half to every rail delivery. That bottleneck arrives exactly as frontline commanders requested a 20% surge in artillery rates for their summer push toward Kharkiv. Rail manifests leaked to independent trackers show that in the first 48 hours after the blaze, outbound shell shipments fell from 1,200 carloads to 310, forcing units to ration fire for the first time since early 2023. The immediate fallout is tactical paralysis. Fewer suppressive barrages mean Ukrainian drones can loiter longer, and armor breakthroughs become riskier. Long-term, the district faces a cascading supply famine because each day of reduced throughput compounds into a 2-week deficit by July. Analysts warn that unless production ramps up or foreign stockpiles arrive, Russia could enter autumn with less than half its doctrinal reserve. The unseen kicker: though, is morale. Soldiers who watch the night sky glow red over Moscow know the homeland is no longer safe. Number 2, the billion-dollar gap no general can close. Replacing 260,000 tons of mixed munitions is not just a factory problem, it is an economic cliff. Russia's defense budget already devours a record 6.7% of GDP, and the ruble's latest slide past 115 per dollar spikes every imported component by double digits. Even if the Federation allocates emergency funds, its domestic TNT line operates at 65% capacity because critical toluene supplies rely on Chinese chemical swaps, now throttled by dual-use export rules. Finance Ministry models leaked last week show a minimum $1 billion capital injection needed merely to restore 2024 stock levels, pushing non-military ministries into fresh austerity. The comparison with Cold War shortages is stark. Back then, the Soviet Union compensated with Warsaw Pact satellites, but today Belarus and North Korea combined can cover barely a quarter of the deficit. Commanders may have to choose between supplying artillery brigades and retaining cruise missile inventories, a trade-off that hands Kyiv strategic breathing room. Number 1, the political time bomb in the Kremlin's basement. What truly terrifies Moscow is not the lost steel, but the narrative crack now widening inside Russia. Telegram channels loyal to Wagner veterans already frame the blaze as divine retribution for the Kremlin's bureaucratic traitors in suits. That anger is infectious. Duma deputies facing autumn elections fear fielding questions about unsafe depots, while families of conscripts demand to know why billions vanished into smoke. If the Kremlin cannot produce quick, public arrests, opposition voices will weaponize the disaster as proof that centralized control breeds complacency. The biggest twist, however, is that intelligence chatter indicates regional governors are quietly reviewing contingency logistics plans normally reserved for wartime secession scenarios. In other words, a munitions fire is morphing into a referendum on Moscow's competence, and that fuse is political, not chemical. Final thoughts. The Vladimir depot inferno did more than melt steel. It melted the illusion that Russia's depth of reserves could outlast any conflict rhythm. Materially, the army forfeited enough firepower to sustain 2 major offensive axes for an entire quarter, a gap no weekend factory overtime can bridge. Strategically, the incident exposed systemic rot from procurement desks to frontline depots, inviting the next sabotage cell to strike deeper. Geopolitically, Moscow's diminished shell pipeline undercuts its bargaining leverage with Beijing and Tehran, because partners prefer dealing with a military that can deliver on promised battle tempo. Domestically, the spectacle of a crimson skyline erodes the myth of rear area invulnerability, inviting public scrutiny that authoritarian systems traditionally deflect abroad. If you want to see tomorrow's headlines today, hit subscribe and join the conversation.